What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the other side of the Firewall podcast, where it's about the latest and greatest in cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breakers, those people of color who made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. My name is Ryan Williams, and as always, I'm joined by Shannon Tynes.
What's up? What's up?
What's going on? And then the full team is here, so we have Chris Abakai.
What's going on, everybody?
And Daniel Acevedo.
How's it going, guys?
What's going on? So please continue to tune in throughout the week. So Monday, Tuesday, our topics, Wednesday, discussion, Thursdays, Ask a CISSP, and then Fridays, everything else. I know last week was jacked up. I was sick. Sorry. This week, I hope to have everything out on time. If you're hearing this and it was late, I failed. I apologize. Definitely continue to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're at over 440 subs, so we're danger close to 500. So please continue to share our content and subscribe. But without further ado, I'll give it to Shannon.
All right, everybody. This first article is from CNN Business, written by Matt Egan and Sean Lingas. And the title of this one is Nearly All AT&T Cell Customers' Call and Text Records Exposed in a Massive Breach. So if you pay attention to the podcast, you already know this has happened before, right? I think it was back in March or April. I think it was April, where they had an issue where they had a bunch of their data that was leaked, right, with AT&T. And I remember this because one of my coworkers has AT&T, and I was making fun of him. And I was like, "This is why we can never talk to you on the phone. Why you always have issues, and why you never get our messages." We were joking with him, but this is actually a different breach that they've had now. So in the span of, not quite 3 months, they've had two major data breaches at AT&T. But this one is call and text message records from mid to late 2022. Tens of millions of AT&T cell phone customers, right? And a lot of non-AT&T customers got exposed in this data breach, right? So what it was the information for, I don't know if you guys ever log on and look at your like cell phone records or anything like that. I haven't in a while, but it'll show the numbers of who you called, where your incoming calls are coming from, text messages that you're getting text messages from. No information in the text message, mind you, right? Which is the same thing here, right? There's no pertinent information as to what was in the conversations or anything, but it shows those numbers, right? So even if you're not an AT&T customer, if you're an AT&T customer that called someone for T-Mobile, Verizon, one of these other smaller ones, right? Like Cricket and, whatever the other ones are that are out there, which usually are smaller versions of the bigger parent companies anyway, right? Like they're provided by Verizon or AT&T or whatever. But that information actually got out, right? So yeah, this is AT&T just got a bad stretch, man, and it seems like every week we're on here talking about this, and these breaches just seem to be affecting more and more people, right? So it's not even if you think you're with a company that's doing right or doing well when it comes to cybersecurity, things like this can happen to where you see it and you're like, man, I'm not even an AT&T customer, but because someone, whether it be a coworker or a friend or whatever, has called me or texted me, now my number is out there, right? Which in this day and age, your number is probably out there anyway. We've probably voluntarily given it to somebody anyway, right? To sign up for, whatever that car was at the mall that you thought you could win if you enter that raffle or whatever it may be, right? So like, it's not like we're not giving our information out there to everyone anyway. But yeah, like AT&T is just having a rough go of it, man. And it's just one of those things where it doesn't matter what you do. And this is the age we live in, right? Because we communicate with people so easily, or because it is so easy for us to communicate with people, this is the second and third order effects of that, right? So now, even if you're not a customer, you need to be on the lookout for, getting spam text messages and things of that nature, right? Because your number's been put out there in a data breach, you know what I'm saying? But let's go this way. Daniel, what's your thoughts on this, man?
No, definitely a lot of good points and highlights of the article. It was a long read. It was a good read. Kind of like what you alluded to already in your intro here. I was like reading through the article and kind of starting to feel like, okay, so what, right? Yeah, they didn't receive the data of the call or the text message, like what was in the body of the message. So I was like, okay, they have the phone numbers, who they're messaging, and like the frequency of it, right? But, like you were saying, a lot of that information, third-party providers even sell that data to telemarketers and that kind of stuff. Or when you sign up for things, that information is kind of out there. So I was like, okay, where's the data? What is the crux of this? On the last third of this article, they hit a lot of like really good points and a lot of scary points, right? So, they talk about this being the first time a cyber incident with the Department of Justice has asked a company to delay the SEC filing for national and public security concerns. So that was really alarming to me right there. I never realized up until this point that the DOJ had gone into the crux of saying, hey, hold on a second, we're seeing things here, which alludes to the second part where they talk to a previous Israeli cyber spy, said that the threat actors can correlate the cell ID data with other information to pinpoint someone's location, right? Now, this started giving me a better scope of what the real problem is here, right? A lot of the intelligence community and cyber community, a lot of the focus has been around, Starlink, the new department for Space Force and those kind of things, because the ability for these satellites to pinpoint people, data, and infrastructure and have a better visibility of what those things are is high intelligence fields, right? There's got to be more here that they're not talking about, but the cell phone IDs correlated with something of the frequency of how many times one person's communicating with another and doing a mapping. That's one thing that's probably like a high potential target here that they're probably not giving us the full scope of what's going on. And the other one also, they talk about, being able to geolocate and then be able to target more efficiently for spamming and phishing attempts and engineering attacks to people as well. That is also something that's very alarming as well, because depending on where you go, where you're located, where your gas stations, grocery stores, those kind of things, now they can kind of social engineer something very targeted to you, especially if they can pinpoint even like the street address of where you live and those kind of things. So the real meat and potatoes for me in this article was in the last third of the article, where they said a lot without really not saying much. Just with those few paragraphs really speaks volumes of what this article is really about. But those are my thoughts, Chris. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the point right in the head right there. I mean, specifically with that Israeli spy, he specifically mentioned now that you could pinpoint people at specific locations to include in the article the White House and Pentagon. So again, this is cell phone data. I mean, me personally, if I would imagine if anybody's communicating, they would go through more secure means than just cell phone data, right? If you're at the Pentagon specifically with the number of enclaves and various different colors phones, if you know what it is, if you know, right? Different phones, right? That they've got at the Pentagon, but them being able to map, hey, there's a communication line between, it might be based on I'm not sure if there's any data that goes outside the country, right? Is there cell phone calls, text, or what to that effect, to other nations? So then there's that to consider as well, right? What's the frequency of communications to, our mission partners, or, maybe not our partners, if you get my drift, right? But I won't go into that. But again, having that obfuscated, having that have that information available, I mean, it's absolutely dangerous from that standpoint. But again, in the latter and actually the last few paragraphs of the article, this incident was actually downloaded from its workspace on a platform called Snowflake. So that's the third-party platform that was really hit with this breach. But this is also not the first time this has happened to Snowflake, and it says the Ticketmaster and Santander Bank were also disclosed massive data breaches linked to Snowflake. So Snowflake, my understanding, is a data AI-driven data platform, right? So they ingest information in which they can an organization using their platform can get meaningful data analysis from whatever metrics that they decide, right? This being a third-party breach, that makes me think this definitely has something to do with user error. There may be some type of social engineering element to this, maybe certain passwords, multi-factor authentication to that platform, right? Or however that data traverses. So maybe there is an aspect of Snowflake where you can download data, and maybe that specific data wasn't encrypted when it was sent to another employee, or just sent through by email or unencrypted text or something to that effect, right? I can only speculate, but really that it's a cloud platform, right? It's a cloud platform. It's on the FedRAMP marketplace, right? So it's got, we know some controls are in place. So it's just, I find it interesting that Snowflake again is involved in this. So based on the article, there have been verified investigations by third-party experts, cybersecurity experts at Mandiant and CrowdStrike, but there was no evidence it was caused by a vulnerability misconfiguration, or breach on Snowflake's platform. So to me, just reading between the lines, I think it's user error or some type of social engineering. So that's all I had to say. But Dan and Shannon really covered it pretty well. Ryan, what do you think?
Like, share, subscribe.
There
I got
you
out
go.
the way. There it is. So I think this falls into the same category as, because we talked about the Ticketmaster incident happened first, or at
Right.
least it was disclosed first, and then we went into Snowflake, and it all signs point that it's not Snowflake's fault. It was an aggregate of data on the interwebs, right? So the keys to the kingdom were basically out there and leaked, but Snowflake's been cleared of all wrongdoing in that regard, based upon the third party analysis. This is just another company that went through Snowflake, and then Snowflake, obviously, the keys of the kingdom were kind of put out there to the interwebs. So I think they're still in the clear in this regard, but it is dragging their name through the dirt, or the mud, or whatever the saying is. But with that being said, I think I think you guys hit the nail on the head. It's like the implications are the metadata. That's why the Department of Justice had to jump in and then delay this, because it does allow patent life and things of that nature. And I'm sure they did it for the masses, right? They're trying to protect us, the people. But I believe more importantly, for their investigation, there's probably an AT&T contract that has policymakers, lawmakers, and things of that nature are probably carrying around phones that are traversing AT&T network. So more importantly, they're like, check this data to make sure there hasn't been patterns of life built up about these people, make sure they're not targeted or things of that nature snatched up, because we now know that they go to Starbucks every day. They make a text to hopefully their significant other, if not their mistress, and they buy their code ruin, right? So I think that's what they're really scared about, is that the wrong person get a hold of this data and they could say, okay, this number is associated with Senator blah blah blah, and this is their routine, and now we know where to scoop them up at. So I think that was more important to them than most. But what do you think, Shannon?
So I got a quick question as we're going through, and you guys are making these very valid points, right? So I know there's minor differences, but what's the major difference between, like, when you talk about Snowflake being like cleared of all wrongdoing, right? What's the difference between that and the Metas and the X, formerly known as Twitters, being dragged out in front of some type of committee saying, hey, you're doing these things when it comes to what's hosted on your sites and we don't like it, right? Is it that they don't think this is important enough to really go after them for it, or what's the difference here? Because it seems
I think it's because they did the due diligence to have a third party come in and investigate first. Like, hey, we got a breach, let's notify. So they did notification like they're supposed to, and then they also had a third party come in and say, okay, based upon, I think because it was aggregate data, right? There was a bunch of commonly used usernames and passwords, things of that nature that were put out there that allowed people to basically have the keys to the kingdom to a lot of these different companies, back ends, basically.
Well, not from a perspective of them being actively responsible, but from them just hosting the information, right?
I think it's different. It's a different
what is the
organization. Like, so with the Metas and the X's of the world, it's more social facing and forward facing for general populace social media, strictly, right? Snowflake is more of a platform as a service entity, right? So they're, like Chris alluded to, data analytics, or also large data storages and capacities, right? It integrates also with AWS and probably Azure and those kind of things. So it's provide the same kind of service in the public limelight. Now, from a business standpoint, though, if I'm doing business with Snowflake, I probably would want them to be put in the same limelight as X and Meta, because they're large name organizations that are now having pretty big breaches or intrusions into their core infrastructure because of Snowflake as a result, right? Whether, I think Chris hit the nail on the head as well, because looking at it, they talk about it being like an illegal access point or an illegal download from Snowflake. So it makes me think that someone clicked the link somewhere or logged in somewhere where they weren't supposed to in some sort of way. And that kind of opened the door for that data to be replicated from AT&T into Snowflake. And since Snowflake was compromised, then that's how the data got out.
Yeah,
But that's my thought about it.
Snowflake. I'm not being sponsored by Snowflake, right? But I think in this regard, like the Meta, the Twitter, the Microsoft, those were built bad, and they should not have been. In this case, Snowflake didn't do anything wrong. Users did what users do. and cause the compromise. But I'm sorry, I cut you off, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. I also think that to some degree, I'm sure based on their service level agreements, memorandums of understanding, that Snowflake has to, obfuscate the data that they get, right, from AT&T. I mean, I would imagine that there's some type of anonymization for these data sets, right? I mean, again, but numbers can be associated, off the data set, right? And they can be correlated outside of just the Snowflake data set. But hopefully there is some type of obfuscation, some type of masking done to protect some type of semblance of personal information on these platforms, right? And I think to your point, Daniel, Snowflake isn't, like you said, customer facing per se. It's an enterprise business to business type platform. So the general populace doesn't willingly put their information on Snowflake, right? Versus Facebook, Meta, social media. That stuff is really, I would say, it's more personal per se. I mean, on that, from that level, right? They more of their personal information, hobbies, yada yada. But this specific data is a little bit different.
Yeah, I guess we'll see who the next company is that's involved in this, because I was going to say Snowball, but that'd be a really bad pun. But it's probably the third or fourth company we've discussed that somehow traverses or works with Snowflake, and it's all part of a bigger breach, right? So
Yeah. The only
it's
thing I
just that
wanted to
AT&T
mention,
was back
my
to
bad,
back.
go ahead. Yeah, the only thing I was going to mention, though, on top of it all, we talked about Santander and Ticketmaster. A lot of the information that was exposed there is PII. You talked to some pattern of life stuff, and I think the main thing, the reason DOJ got in here as well, besides pattern of life and high value targets that can be targeted from this kind of attack, the geo mapping and the metadata from the cell phone ID stuff is crucial, because let's say it's in a senator's pocket or someone that works in the Pentagon or the White House. Now you got those cell phone IDs, you got that metadata geolocation. Now you can start mapping out those areas as well, which is, in the DOJ's eyes, military, those facilities aren't allowed to have cell phones or cell phone mapping or geolocation for those reasons, because we won't want that to be public knowledge, right? So I think that's another big reason why this one, out of all the other Snowflake cases, kind of is having such a big highlight point, right? You got to read through the article, because at first glance it just kind of looks like, okay, so people's texts and calls got loose, their mistresses and their baby mamas, the laundry's out in the open. But actually this metadata is the real, like, jewels of the kingdom here. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Or for blackmail purposes, right? You find out Hunter Biden's got more kids that he's not acknowledging, you know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Right. So I guess we'll see if this continues to grow. I don't think it will. Honestly, I think the bigger thing, this is the B story, right? The A story is the Snowflake, that it continues to bubble over. Like, how many corporations were using it? Probably a ton. So we'll see what the next one is in this domino. But yeah, I haven't been an AT&T customer for a decade, I want to say. So finally, one of these missed me. So it's about time. But
You
continue
got
to
caught in
tune in.
the pre-roll.
Yeah, that's true. I
Customers,
did.
so.
Yeah. Because I think they said that it went back like 10 years or something like that. Something crazy. I don't know. I'm a T-Mobile customer. T-Mobile will never sponsor us because I'm always taking a dig at them. Because, like, I know T-Mobile's happy right now. Like, it wasn't us this time. So wait a month or two and it'll be them again. Continue to hit up all the websites to go by our name. The other side of the firewall, the other side of the FW, or ask is CISSP. Hit me up personally. I'm at RY Security Guy. That's RY Security Guy. You can find me on pretty much every social media platform. And then you could find Chris and Daniel by their names on LinkedIn. So definitely hit them up as well. We have a newsletter. Please subscribe. We have we're over 1,400 subscribers now. So definitely check that one out as well. Stay safe. Stay secure.